Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 13th of January, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me in the studio.
Afternoon, Brian.
Afternoon to you. And we're also joined by Diane Rasmussen McAdie, who will be joining us from Edinburgh with a live link. So welcome, Diane. Now, we're going to get kicked off on the subject of confusion and chaos, because this seems to be the thing that our audience is picking up on. We're just drowning under a deluge of different reports and media claims. And let's just bring a few of these on screen. I could have selected 50 or 100, but all sorts of different headlines talking about different bits and pieces. Here's a selection on your screen. Is it Starmer's controversial AI reforms that we should be paying attention to, or problems in the NHS? Or was it Tony Blair looking after our mental health? Well, no. The most dangerous one we saw was the Telegraph, which is tucked away on the left of the screen. Let's bring this on. Here it is. Net Zero Nudge Unit accused of COVID scare tactics will push heat pumps on the public. So here we've got that the public is to replace all of their gas boilers with the controversial and many say inefficient heat pumps. But the government is so desperate to get this agenda rammed home that they're going to use the behavioural insights team. And yes, this was the team that was working with the government and other psychologists in order to scare the public during lockdown, so that the public followed the government's directives. So scare, fear, anxiety being unleashed on the public in order that we should follow the government's policy. Now, the Telegraph does mention that fear factor, and that one of the behavioural insights team members was concerned about it. But of course, what the Telegraph didn't do is go into the depths of the beast in order to show the public what we're really talking about. So UK Column will do that now. This is the MINDSPACE document out of the Cabinet Office in 2010. I'm putting it up on screen so that all of the information is there in front of you. But David Halpern mentioned it in the text on the right, one of the key people. And if we get into that document, there was a paragraph saying potential for controversy, where the government was admitting that if and when people really understood what was happening, they would accuse the government of brainwashing. That's absolutely what the government was doing. And then this was one of the key sentences. When this applied psychology was used, they said that means that citizens may not fully realise that their behaviour is being changed, or at least how it is being changed. Clearly, this opens up the government to charges of manipulation. So whatever you think about politicians, that they lie, deceive, cheat, or they're into criminal activity, or even children, these people now using applied psychology. And the UK Column warned and warned and warned about this. Here's May 2013, when we're pointing out that Francis Maud was busy promoting that so-called nudge unit. And then with it, we also warned in 2018, a little bit before, if I remember correctly, these key statements. So Cameron ally and one-time advisor Danny Kruger was forced to resign as a Tory candidate for Sedgefield after he was quoted as saying that the Conservatives plan to introduce a period of creative destruction in the public services. And Ben, surely that's what we've got happening around us at the moment. But that was one quote. Nicholas Bowles MP at the same time was quoted in The Guardian and elsewhere. The Prime Minister and his deputy, Nick Clegg, want their people power revolution to unleash chaotic effects across local communities. Chaotic, therefore, in our vocabulary, is a good thing. These people, deadly serious, they were going to break the country, and they were going to do it in a revolutionary sense. and essentially they were going to break down the structure of our society in order to build back better. Well, that's the phrase that they're now using. Now, there were other warnings. So if we just bring this one on screen, we've got Peter Hitchens. He said we're on the verge of founding Britain's first thought police. Well, clearly that's already happened. And look at the date. This is 2015 when the UK column was warning about this. Now, if we've got a state that is going to use propaganda and psychological reframing to change the minds of the population, we shouldn't be surprised if that's going to be used when there's a state of war to help make people in this country more fearful. Let's have a look at Ukraine, because of course that's one of the major conflict areas in the world today. Here's the BBC headline: Russia claims capture of Ukrainian frontline town. But if we put in what the real headline should be, Russia continues to advance on key fronts, and Russia is poised to capture the strategic cities of Pokrovsk, Chasiv Yar, and Toretsk. And these captures mean that there is a massive change on the battlefield. But of course, the BBC is simply not telling the truth. Here's another BBC headline: Zelensky offers exchange of North Korean soldiers. So you're led to believe one thing by the headline itself. I'll come back onto that. But if we put some truthful headlines here, Russia is close to finalizing Ukraine's Kursk salient. 50,000 declared Ukrainian casualties in that sector of the front alone. Ukrainian losses climb as Ukraine retreats. So this is to be expected, because as men leave their defensive positions, they're more vulnerable to attack. And the other thing that's been happening is the desertions in the Ukrainian army have been climbing as morale in their army is collapsing. No mention of this for the BBC. And this is the little piggy from the BBC that the soldier that their article discussed had exhibited Russian ID showing that he was Turan from the Russian Republic of Tuvan, which is on the Mongolian border. And significantly, there was no speech. So we are to believe that these are Koreans, when the reality seems to be that actually they are Russians from that Mongolian border area. However, the BBC doesn't bother with the facts. It just wants to get the spin headline out. And if we look at what's been going on in more detail, this is the sort of thing that the press has been talking about. The Russian army is incompetent and morale is poor. That was a lie. The Russian military equipment is inferior. Another lie. Ukraine will win because the Russians hate Putin and Russian people will force a regime change. That was clearly untrue. Russia is running out of munitions. Well, that was a laughable claim at the time, but it goes on. Ukraine will win because of Western weapons, such as the Javelin anti-tank missiles or the Patriot missile systems. That was all proven to be false. Ukraine will win because of US, UK, and NATO special forces and military advisors. None of that worked. Ukraine will win because of US, German, and UK tanks. That's the Abrams, the Leopard, and the Challenger tanks. They're busy burning on the battlefield. And on the propaganda goes, Ukraine will win because of US F-16s. That, of course, never happened. Ukraine will win because of NATO training for Ukrainian conscripts at NATO bases. That was false. Ukraine will win because of those special advisors. Sorry, that's a duplication there. And Ukraine will win because of US and NATO drones. If we look at the facts on the ground, we're seeing that the Russians are outperforming the whole of the Ukrainian military, the US and NATO combined, and they're outstripping the US and NATO in their productions of munitions on the battlefield. We've got that the Russian air defense, particularly the missile systems such as the S-400, are showing outstanding performance. And the Russian adaptation to drone warfare, surveillance and attack is clearly outstanding. And it goes on because the Russians' electronic warfare was described as eye-watering by an American general several 2 years ago, in fact. The Russian glide bomb technology, up to 3,000 kilogram flying bombs, is outstanding, and there's no Ukrainian or Western defense. And the Russian hypersonic missile technology is outstripping the US and Western technology. So overall, the situation is that the Russian military, the army and the Air Force in particular, has adapted to large-scale battle conditions in Ukraine. And even though they've been under the combined US, NATO and Ukrainian space, airborne and drone battlefield surveillance system, their performance has been outstanding. That is not for the UK column to be promoting Russia per se. What we are demonstrating here is the sheer lies and propaganda that's come through the BBC and the Western press about the reality of the battle. Meanwhile, in UK, and again, the UK column has been warning about this, we see the breakdown of our own military. So here is a sex incident on board one of our nuclear submarines, which resulted in the captain of that vessel being relieved of his command. And if that isn't enough, here's the Armed Forces Network getting very excited because Satanism has been approved for use in the Royal Navy. We're an equal opportunities employer, and we don't stop anybody from having their own religious values. Our policy is that wherever practical, reasonable requests for time and facilities that do not impact on operational effectiveness or the welfare of other personnel are met. I believe we're looking at deliberate, orchestrated breakdown across our society. It's the NHS, it's education, it's the police, it's the military. This is not accidental. We are being attacked by our own government. And I think, Ben, you've got more to tell us about how this is being done.
Absolutely. And it's not just our own government, it's also the markets, importantly, the public-private partnership that's being used to create chaos, out of which a new order will be built. And I'm going to reintroduce you to this gentleman, Brent Hoberman, CBE. The British establishment are absolutely at the centre of all of this. We're going to meet a few people today who have honours from the royal family. And I mentioned him first on the column on the 16th of December last year. He's the exec chairman of Founders Factory. He was the co-founder of lastminute.com, which he sold for $1.1 billion in 2005, is where he established most of his wealth. And he's now been ploughing that into disruptive innovation, startups. He also works on the UK advisory board for government digital services. So he sits right at the heart of digitisation of the British state. Interestingly, there's a link there between the MINDSPACE document and GDS, which I don't have time to get into right now. But there's something that happened in the early years of that first Cameron government that is really crucial to understand what we're seeing around us today. He's also on the advisory board of Google Cloud. So we can see how the technology companies in the state are really beginning to merge around people like this. He's also on the advisory board for the World Economic Forum Digital Europe Group, and he is a young global leader of the World Economic Forum, right? So very important individual. We spoke about this meeting, this brainstorming session that he had last year with Rachel Reeves, UK Chancellor, and Peter Kyle, Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, where they talked about using AI across government, spreading AI outside of urban centres. Really importantly, they want this to be used across the whole country. Also plugging Ewan Blair's recruitment company into central government to create a marketplace for new types of people being employed by central government, and then also stripping back regulations around technology. That was the focus of this conversation. Hoberman is also very closely linked into Oxford University. We spoke about his backing for William Hague to be the Oxford Chancellor. Hague has been elected as Oxford Chancellor. Hoberman was part of the campaign to make that happen. And he's also very keen, as I suppose you'd expect, on Elon Musk helping Britain slash public spending, the digitisation of the state, bringing in big tech billionaires into central government in order to transform how things are run. The new order, ultimately, out of this chaos that we're seeing, the breakdown that we're seeing. Now, I mentioned this group, Founders Forum. Right, so this is where he has put a lot of his money, his time, and his investments since 2005. It's grown a lot. I used to work in this space. I was aware of them. It was a really high-level network, very exclusive, invitation only. It was primarily focused around an event, but they've subsequently expanded the group out into a whole bunch of different areas. So they've got the events and the networking, bringing people together, facilitating conversations, convening is the big word that I hear people using nowadays. They convene politicians, investors, startup founders. They've got an education dynamic to what they do. They've got professional services, so they can advise you as a startup founder in their curated community around legal issues, around strategic communication. How do you hire people? How do you incentivize them? They've also got an investment component. So part of that is First Minute Capital, which is essentially like a family office type setup for Hoberman. He's got a load of his money in there. But then also they've got a broader proposition around Founders Factory. They've got a philanthropy component as well. So they can actually, once they've made you a millionaire, they can help you spend that money in a philanthropic way. And you can imagine how all that money gets directed, right? It's all the same kind of social innovation stuff that we're used to, the kind of things that we talk about a lot in terms of the philanthropic space on the column. And you can see, if we go back to the slide there, this is all backed by their partners in this are big tech, Google, Salesforce. You've got McKinsey, the global strategy firm in there, Goldman Sachs, HSBC, as you get an understanding of the kind of pedigree that we're talking about here. Like it's quite an impressive mix, to be perfectly honest with you. And actually, they've also, interestingly for me in particular, sold this organization, Founders Intelligence, into Accenture, which is one of the big systems integrators, the big technology consulting firms. And that will actually sit in the group where a company that I used to work at was sold back in 2018. Yeah, so I was right in the sweet spot of my professional background, right? Helping people with these kinds of strategic problems relating to technology, right? So it's a really interesting group. They've got a lot of stuff going on. But a lot of it for me is really, it's about, first of all, burnishing the reputation of the big technology firms. So these big tech firms are key strategic partners to Founders Forum. And these are the people that are ultimately going to be building the infrastructure on which this new digital future is going to be built. But they are horrible companies. Yeah, they are deeply unethical. They spy, they lie, they track, they trace, they abuse their power. And they're really the robber barons of the 21st century. So in order to kind of address that, rather than changing their behavior, what they do is they come along and they say, hey, look, we're going to invest in UK startups and we're going to help create a new economic system for people to have an opportunity to create wealth for themselves by becoming startup founders, right? So they'll get in organizations like Founders Forums to establish these ecosystems that ultimately, in reality, they can invest in. Yeah. So this is presented as a kind of altruistic move where they're trying to establish fairness in the economic system, but actually that's not what's happening at all. And they'll use it as a reputation washing exercise, ultimately, for people like this. One example from a recent report from Founders Forum, this guy, John Bomfrey, who's the UK country manager at Amazon. You can see at the bottom there that they're first in being the most supportive to tech founders. They've invested $430 million in European startups across 17 transactions since 2019. And he says, we have a responsibility to support the thriving and diverse startup ecosystem in Europe, but they've actually destroyed the high street. Yeah. So we don't have a high street anymore. We got Amazon. And if you look at the impact that's had on British cities, it's completely destroyed them, right? You know, the high street was a focal point of daily life. We now got Amazon. Yeah.
We've now got people stuck at home waiting for a box to arrive. That's the highlight of their day instead of interaction with people on the high street. That's the point. Yeah,
exactly. The Founders Forum is here saying, oh, no, they're helping us build a new economy. This is fantastic. And obviously Google are in there as well. It's another one of the big tech companies. So we can see that they've invested in 50 funding rounds over the past 5 years. They've invested $730 million. 1 out of 2 startup founders think that they're great. And Debbie Weinstein, who at the time was actually the head of the UK for Google, she's now just been bumped up to run Europe. She's EMEA top lady for the whole of, not just top lady, top individual for the whole of Google, this lady, Debbie Weinstein. She's saying that competition is healthy for everyone. We want to see more businesses leveraging the power of technology to improve people's lives.
Except if they're challenging Google.
Well, quite, right? And this is really the key point, right? And actually, there's a little quote here, again, from one of the Founders Forum reports. This lady, Angie Marr, saying, big tech provides the platform on which businesses are run. So when Debbie Weinstein's talking about enabling competition, what she's actually saying is, you can operate on top of our infrastructure, right? But you're going to buy from us. This is a marketplace that we have built and control. And you can come in with your little fiddly startup, whatever it might be. We might chuck you a bit of money. We might let you in our office from time to time. But ultimately, you're never actually going to challenge Google fundamentally in its core business, right? And when we talk about big tech, it's these companies. Yeah. So Meta, aka Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp on the top left there. NVIDIA, which is kind of the new kid on the block, specializes in chips for AI systems. And then Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft. Right. And this is the hegemony, right? This is the global digital marketplace, and the whole of the business world, in their view, needs to run on top of this stuff. And so they're completely dominant. And these are all American technology companies, importantly. But also, just as importantly, it's not just the market, it's also the state. Increasingly, it's the state. And Blair, at his event, Future of Britain event last year, was saying, I'm advising Labour to talk to Google. He's advising Labour to talk to Debbie Weinstein. And I know that Debbie Weinstein has been talking directly to Starmer and other members of the cabinet. They're particularly interested in education at the moment. That's their big focus area. Yeah. Public-private partnership, digitisation of the economic system, and the replacement of what used to constitute economic activity and output with something that isn't what we used to think it was.
Yeah, showing something for your labour and your work, actually creating something. Yeah,
exactly. So that doesn't exist anymore. We've now got just apps, and the same thing is about to happen to the state, and it's being driven by people like Tony Blair. And actually, Founders Forum are right at the heart of this, because really interestingly, and I was mind slightly blown when I came across this last week. In 2023, they acquired this organization, Tech Nation. Right now, superficially, Tech Nation looks basically a bit like Founders Forum Group, right? So it's an ecosystem of different component parts. They're interested in climate, because obviously everyone's interested in climate. They've got a Rising Stars program where they bring in young people that they want to be tech innovators. They've got a Future 50 program, which is all about the next big 50 tech companies in the UK that are going to list on the stock market, right? It was founded by this guy, Gerard Grech, CBE, who has now, after the acquisition, gone on to run something called Founders Cambridge. He's the MD of Founders Cambridge, which means that between Hoberman at Oxford and Grech at Cambridge, this new integrated proposition of Tech Nation and Founders Forum have basically sewn up Oxbridge. Yeah. So if you think about all of the intellectual firepower of Oxford and Cambridge University and how that can be commercialized, these two people, this organization, are absolutely slap bang in the middle of it. And he's the founder of Tech Nation. He's also on the UK Government Digital Economy Council, and he's also a member of the World Economic Forum Digital Economy Board. Yeah. So we can see again, WEF, UK government, they've integrated.
Yeah, totally linked.
Yeah. So they're operating hand in glove. And Tech Nation is quite an impressive organization. Again, I remember when this popped up, I was still working in industry. They've been at the heart of what they call a remarkable decade of tech growth. We've seen $1 trillion added to the UK technology ecosystem. That's just valuation, by the way. Like, that's not actual output. That's just what we think we can flog this for. Really importantly, it's what this whole ecosystem is about. In the UK, we now have 135 tech unicorns, which is a 10x increase in 10 years. A unicorn is a privately owned company worth $1 billion or more. Right? So again, we used to have an economy. Now we've got tech unicorns, where you get a tiny handful of people in these highly automated technology-enabled companies who have these huge valuations, which we then get presented as being good for the country, but it's not good for the country. It's good for the people who run those companies and the people who invested in them, and organisations like Founders Forum.
Yeah.
But actually, for the broad population, there's absolutely nothing here at all. And we also apparently got 10 decacorns, which is privately held companies worth $10 billion or more, right? And what kind of companies are we talking about? There's these kinds of companies. You know, lots of app logos there, but the ones that jumped out at me was Deliveroo, right? So, you know, that's delivering kebabs via an app. That's economic output now, apparently. We used to have a steel industry. We used to have a coal industry. We used to have proper manufacturing. Now we've got kebabs being delivered by a lot of illegal immigrants, frankly. You know, that's what their workforce is built on, you know.
Because it's cheap labour.
Because it's cheap labour, yeah, exactly. And then so that they're helping to form these things, establish them, float them on the stock markets. This is from last month. So you can actually see Brett Hoberman there on the balcony at the London Stock Exchange with one of these startups that they're promoting. But where did this come from? Right, really crucially, yeah, because this for me is absolutely critical in understanding that this particular group, right, is that actually the tech city, the tech nation initiated from, there's a timeline here, I can't go through all of it right now, right, but actually initiated here in 2011 from the Tech City Investment Organisation, right, which was launched by Prime Minister David Cameron in April 2011 to support East London's tech cluster. And it was originally part of UK Trade and Investment. So this is a UK government asset. It was founded, not least in part, on the back of advice from this guy, Rohan Silva, who was an advisor to David Cameron. He's the guy that co-authored that article trying to bring Elon Musk in to digitize the British state. And fascinatingly, they actually ran the global talent visa program, bringing in high-tech people into the UK economy. And so they brought nearly 5,500 people in over the past 10 years on these global talent visas endorsed by Tech Nation. And after the acquisition, that is now being handled by the Founders Forum Group.
Yeah, it's one huge network. And at the time that David Cameron was helping set this lot up, he was also bringing in his big society, which a lot of people think never happened, but actually it's absolutely happened. It's happened under the surface. So there was the technological aspect, and there was also the control of society, including by creating what was called an army. That was the word used, an army of young people, the change agents, to help bring this new society through. So all happening in front of our very eyes once you know where to look.
Yeah, absolutely. And all, again, just to bring Hoberman back on screen, going directly down to the bottom line there, this is World Economic Forum, particularly this public-private marketplace and the way that advanced technology, the big tech companies, international capital, the British government are coordinating with each other and to effect this transformation of the economic system. And then increasingly, as we'll see, certainly this year, it will accelerate the digitisation of the British state, all being driven out of this network.
Okay, I'm going to say to that, Ben, of course, UK Column is talking about this because we consider this to be the real news to understand what is happening around us in our society and in the political system. But the BBC and the main newspapers and the other TV channels simply do not talk about this. It's as if it doesn't exist. They prefer us to be distracted. And one of the things that has distracted a lot of people over the last few days has been the wildfires in Los Angeles. So, Diane, let's bring you on screen with us because you've been having a good look at the events around these truly horrible fires.
Yes, Brian. Hello, and hello, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. A video that I would like to play silently while I introduce the segment, just to kind of start to drive home as much as the fires are looking from the ground right now in Los Angeles. This was just posted yesterday. So following up on Mike's report that he started on Friday, I want to go deeper to ask some of the bigger questions that kind of, I don't have any answers for certain things at this point, but we certainly do have a lot of questions that we need to be asking. Just as a quick update, this morning, CNN reported that so far at least 24 people have been killed, but that we don't know for sure. We can't assess for sure how high that will rise. And the winds are up dangerously again. when they're still at a critical point of attempting to contain the fires. So as we go into thinking about, how intense this looks, was this really only caused by high winds? Was it really? We don't really have a lot of answers yet, and we may never get them. But one of the questions that I do want to focus on was why the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, was in Ghana on the 7th of January when the fires broke out. The basic answer that the mainstream media is giving us is that she was there for the inauguration of the new president of Ghana, John Dramani Mahama. However, why do we care so much about Ghana? And also, why does the UK care so much about Ghana? There was a delegation of 4 people that the White House appointed to go to the inauguration. One was the director of the U.S. Office of Management and Budget. She led the delegation. There was also a special assistant to the president and senior director for African Affairs at the White House, the U.S. ambassador to Ghana, and then finally Karen Bass. Karen Bass, she was elected to be the mayor of Los Angeles in November of 2021. She's known for a long history in having relationships between the U.S. and Africa. She's a former congresswoman and chaired related committees. But it was known as early as the 3rd of January that there was a risk of extreme fires and rapid fires planning to be could be spread in Los Angeles. But anyway, she got onto a plane to Accra on the 4th anyway. When she returned to Los Angeles through military flights, she was immediately questioned at the airport by a very ambitious Sky News reporter. And let's see what she had to say in response to this reporter when he met her at the airport.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today?
Can you back up? I appreciate it.
Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster? No apology for them? Do you think you should have been visiting Ghana while this was unfolding back home?
So very conveniently guided away from the gate at that point. I'd also say that a couple of days later, this was just over the weekend, she posted an update with a message for the people of Los Angeles. And I just want you to watch her expression on her face as she greets them and talks about
Angelinos. We're still going through it. And to any of you and all of you that have experienced a loss, the grief, the anger, the just utter shock, I've seen the devastation. It is unbelievable the amount of loss that people have experienced. But we have to get through this crisis, and I know that we will. I was at the Sylmar command post today, and I saw the work of our first responders and how they've been able to defeat the fires in certain areas. We know we still have much more to go, and we know the winds are going to kick up again. But we got to stick together. We got to stand strong. And then we have to rebuild our city. We're the nation's second largest city, one of the greatest cities in the world. And we stay together, and we will rebuild an amazing city. So thank you, Angelinos, and my thoughts and prayers are out to all of you that are going through unbelievable loss and pain today. We will get through this. Thank you.
Now, if I ran a city and my city was burning to the ground, I would not be smiling that much. Just a bit more background on Karen Bass, because this is important. She was a potential vice presidential pick for Joe Biden in 2020. We have a photo here of Kamala Harris and Karen Bass having a great time together, I believe, where it shows that she was actually called a revolutionary communist. What this means is that starting in the 1970s, she spent time working in Cuba with what was called the Venceremos Brigade, which means we will overcome. It's a Marxist group which was started by Fidel Castro's regime to subvert American interests, weaken democracies, and spread communism around the world. And the mission of this particular organization is to radicalize young, impressionable American leftists and terrorism and guerrilla warfare. Members of this brigade were even taught how to make bombs. And she has returned to Cuba several times throughout the years, including after she was in Congress starting in 2010. And so why we have to ask about Ghana, so this is really getting into the heart of the issue, I believe. So why does the US care so much about it? It's a Commonwealth country. It has around 35 million people. It is a lower middle income country. It ranks 101st in the world in CO2 emissions from consuming energy, if you believe in climate change. The Ghana Statistical Service says that it is a source, transit, and destination country for people subjected to forced labor and sex trafficking. It is an illicit producer, transit hub, and user for drugs such as cannabis, heroin, and cocaine. There are problems with widespread crime, financial issues, a cost of living crisis, money laundering going on. And so we see in, looking at the relationships between the US and the UK for the US, on the 10th of January, there was an official government website called Share America, which published an article about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris visiting Southern Africa, sort of at the end of their term. In 2023, Kamala Harris announced over $7 million in private sector investments to boost food production across Africa and mitigate the effects of climate change. So we're seeing climate change come in here a lot. The vice president led a discussion in Ghana with women entrepreneurs when she announced a $1 billion global initiative to support women's entrepreneurship in Africa. On the 3rd of January 2025, the British High Commission hosted the third UK-Ghana Diaspora New Year Networking Mixer, which was to connect London and Accra, connecting capitals for economic growth. The trade between these two countries stood at £1.4 billion in 2024, which they really are emphasizing has the potential to grow further, talking about the diaspora between Ghana and the UK. And the British High Commissioner to Ghana, Harriet Thompson, said at this event that economic growth is a top priority for both UK and Ghana governments together. And we have witnessed this impact tonight, and this will continue to be a priority for the British High Commission in 2025. The British Minister for Africa, Ray Collins, who is now Lord Collins of Highbury, represented the UK at the inauguration, and he said that they look forward to working closely together to advance the shared growth of economic growth, security, tackling the climate crisis once again. And this goes on for the last several months since Labour has gotten in, that this relationship has been growing. If we take a look at here at John Mahama, he is WEF. There's a long biography for him on the World Economic Forum website, as are many other Ghana politicians. What Mahama has promised, even though this is his third term, is that he now promises to reset the country, if that term sounds familiar. In 2016, he was named the co-chair of the SDG Advocates by the UN Secretary General, which is mandated to generate momentum and commitment to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And back in 2020, the previous Prime Minister of Ghana, as well as the co-chair of the UN Secretary General's SDG Advocates at the time, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, he said that the COVID response in 2020 can't be unlinked from the Sustainable Development Goals, and that COVID mostly affected vulnerable societies. So let's hear back from COP29 in Baku. Let's hear what Addo had to say about climate finance to COP29.
Through Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, Ghana has mobilized $800 million United States dollars by trading carbon credits with nations like Switzerland and Sweden. However, we cannot reach our climate goals alone. We call on our global partners to honor their commitments, ensuring accessible concessional financing for sustainable development in Africa without unsustainable debt.
So now we're seeing that we're talking about channeling the money, and I've reported on this previously about climate finance, about sort of channeling money from countries like the US and the UK to countries such as Ghana. We see that also in COP29, they announced what is called the Ghana Climate Prosperity Plan, which is a strategy aimed at tackling climate change while fostering economic growth. The plan is to generate an economic gain of $76 billion by 2050. And we see here also Dr. Mohamed Amin Adam, who is Ghana's Minister for Finance. He started a climate financing division back in October 2024, which is meant to coordinate and lead climate finance initiatives. And one of the specific plans is called the Akosombo Net Zero Industrial Park, which they want to develop in Ghana, which is meant to be the first fully renewable energy-powered industrial park in Africa. designed to attract industries committed to the particular sustainable development goals and so on. This is a $105 million project, which will be financed through public-private partnerships, equity investments, concessional debt, and grants. So going back to Los Angeles once again, back in December 2020, there was a document that's published. You can find it anywhere on the internet. It will be in the show notes, called Smart City LA 2028, in which it declared in a very long document that the city of Los Angeles envisions a highly digital and connected city by 2028. Los Angeles residents will experience an improved quality of life by leveraging technology to meet urban challenges, and that LA will no longer be the car capital of the world. And in just recent days, the California Governor, Gavin Newsom, has already said that the rebuilding of Los Angeles after the apocalyptic fires, as he's calling them, will coincide with their hosting of the Summer Olympics in 2028. So I think we just have to ask, are these things connected? We can also see as well, there's videos from the World Economic Forum that sort of is talking about AI fires and what AI can do to prevent fires, but also saying that these will require behavioral changes as well as technical innovations. So Brian and Ben, more questions than answers, but I think we will continue to need to look into this because there are clearly some things going on here.
Some things going on, some global things going on. But thank you, Diane, for that really excellent segment. To our audience, if you like what we're doing, please support the UK column, make us a donation or take out a membership on a monthly or annual, or you can join us with a lifetime membership. We absolutely rely on your support and donations. The UK column shop is there if you'd like to make a purchase to help us. And we do promote Clive de Carle's pharmaceutical health products. I used the wrong word. Apologies for that. Health products. And we get a small commission on those if you purchase some of those products. Now, we'd also like to say share our material. That's very important. Do give the UK column recognition if you can. And so I've moved on one here. Of course, every Thursday and every Tuesday and Thursday, we've got an interview. And tomorrow's interview at 1:00 will be Dr. Mike Yeadon, who will be commenting on matters medical and what's happening in the world. And also like to point out that the MHRA petition is still running. I think it's over 2,000 signatures now, but we're encouraging people to get involved and sign up to that. This is all pressure to make things happen, and we should be engaging with that. And also another reminder of the Scottish People's COVID-19 inquiry, Saturday, the 22nd of February, 2025, 9:30 to 4:30 p.m. The main hall at Lauriston Hall, 28 Lauriston Street, Edinburgh. So that's £25 for an all-day event, tea and coffee and lunch included. And it's good to see people really trying to make things happen. So, Ben, I think this is back to you on a key subject under the surface in UK, but also many other places worldwide, is child abuse.
Absolutely. And is the story that I kicked the year off with last Monday. It is the Asian grooming gangs. There's been an absolute deluge of information and conversation about this over the past week. I think it's going to continue. It's been turned into a political football by Musk and many others, actually. I mean, there's a whole ecosystem of talking heads on Twitter and elsewhere who are really trying to use this to attack the UK government, and not without good reason, actually. So I'll just remind you that we started by showing you some clips from this gentleman, Rajamir, who is a whistleblower from Oldham. He's been trying to draw attention to grooming gangs operating in Oldham for the past probably over 10 years now, actually. And he's been on Twitter talking about the case. There's a big, long tweet here. I won't read the whole thing out. We'll provide a link to it so you can go and have a look at it. We've talked about the political dynamic of this, but I just want to drill in quickly on the media dynamic, which I think is really interesting. So in this tweet, he did add that publications like the Oldham Times and the Manchester Evening News didn't just report on my case, they amplified the lies around it. They were trying to help cover things up, according to Mia. They were not alone. A man called Joshi from Manchester Mill launched an online smear campaign against me, and he even recruited Beja Cummings from Tortoise Media, right? So Rajamir is annoying a lot of the right people, as far as I can tell. Tortoise have come after his reputation, and also the Mill, who we spoke about last year. Back in May, I introduced you to this new media organisation. So this is Joshi Herman, who's the founder and the exec editor, basically saying that Elon Musk thinks that there is a hidden grooming scandal in Oldham. Why can't the police find it? Right now, he's emphatically saying that this thing doesn't exist, and actually, he's been apparently been reporting on this for about 6 years. Right, so again, this is a long post there from Roger Meir and a very long article here from Joshi Herman, and this runs extremely deep. Right, this Oldham issue. There's something going on here. Right, obviously, there's two very different sides to this story. And I'm not, if I'm being honest with you, completely clear on where the whole thing's going, to be honest with you, right? Because actually, when you look for Oldham child abuse cases, you don't come up with that much. But you look around the rest of the country, actually did some research over the past few days. We got 25, 30 different locations across the north of England, even in places like Aylesbury in the south of England, just outside of London, where this stuff is happening. We do have examples of Asian grooming gangs operating. How the Oldham story develops, I'm not entirely sure. But what I am interested in is Joshi Herman and his role in this, and the fact that, as I pointed out back in May last year, Mill Media is actually largely backed by Sir Mark Thompson, who's currently the chief executive of CNN. He was also at the New York Times, director general at the BBC, spun some of the crimes of Jimmy Savile, famously cancelled a Panorama episode, which would have exposed Savile before he died. And then when he was about to be questioned about it, Thompson basically skipped the country, went to go and work at the New York Times and avoided accountability ultimately. And he's one of the primary investors in Mill Media. He's personally put in several £100,000 into this organisation. I think that really undermines the credibility of Mill Media, Joshi Herman, and actually gives them really zero credibility when it comes to handing down moral judgments about child rape, unfortunately, Joshi. So that's the media dynamic to this, and this will evolve. We'll certainly be talking about it over the coming weeks. But also, let's remind ourselves that there was a vote on this in Parliament. Should we investigate child grooming gangs? A vote on it on Wednesday last week. Let's see what the result was.
The ayes to the right, 111. The noes to the left, 364.
The ayes to the right were 111, the noes to the left 364. So the noes have it, the noes have it. Unlock.
What do you make of that, Brian?
Well, I'm just not surprised, because the state or the government never wants to go near the abuse of children, because, of course, if there was a proper investigation, then the leads would run straight back to the government and government agencies themselves, as we're going to discuss a little bit later in the news. So I'm absolutely not surprised. This is the state protecting itself, in my opinion.
Indeed, the accused deciding that they shouldn't be investigated. That's not how justice works, right? This is just an astonishing period of time, to be perfectly honest. I mean, that was astonishing. Every single Labour MP basically saying, no, we don't want to look at this. And then this popped up over the weekend. So we got former Labour MP Ivor Kaplan, who was arrested in Hove for trying to meet with what he thought was a 15-year-old boy for sex. So he was arrested for engaging in sexual communication with a child. He's been released on bail. He was a member of Blair's government. Was a Labour MP for many, many years. And his Twitter feed is an absolute mess. So there were some tweets shared by lawyers from Light who censored them. This is from Telegram, saying that we don't think that this can be shared. Surely this cannot be his real account, right? Because actually some of the stuff on there is so explicit that it beggars belief that this is even until recently a senior politician. But the account is being followed by Rachel Reeves and others in the government. Now I've censored them. Lawyers from Light censored them. But Diane decided that actually the UK column viewership did need to see these tweets. So she's going to put some stuff on screen, I think, in a moment.
So that we see something about what's going on here. So this is pretty offensive material, but we took a decision that to some extent should be shown. So Diane, over to you.
Yeah, so it's basically just following on what Ben's just reported, and I redacted, but I didn't redact as much as Ben did, because these were just tweets from January 9th, so just 4 days ago, right before his arrest. So we have about 10% of it redacted, I guess, with the most important parts blacked out, hopefully. We have what else do we have? I think I've got a few different tweets here from the 9th. This one is him basically thanking Keir Starmer for being a wonderful prime minister. It's kind of a mix of Keir Starmer being wonderful and really inappropriate photos of men and boys. And then finally one that he apparently retweeted and offered to contribute to the proceedings that are shown there to make it put as delicately as possible. I would add that just before the news started, he has now been released on bail, according to the National. So we'll see where this goes and if anything at all happens to him from what he's done. We're not sure, like we said, for sure, if this is really his Twitter. We can't necessarily verify it, but we do see that Rachel Reeves, a.k.a. Rachel from Accounts, does follow the account as well as other people with the name Kaplan. So we'll have to see what happens from here.
A pretty despicable trail, but the government doesn't want to get anywhere near the subject of child abuse. This is a report back from 2017, UK column, Devon and Cornwall police officer sentenced for indecent images and illegal ammunition offences. We were also reporting about this one, Edward Heath. Police delayed the Conifer report to avoid overshadowing the Tory conference. So that tells you a few priorities of our police force. And this one, particularly interesting from Russia Today, that French courts had ruled that an 11-year-old girl had consensual sex with a 28-year-old man. And this was really setting the scenes for, well, it's a life choice for the girls, which is similar to what they've been talking about in the Midlands. Sorry, I can bring a bit of text on screen here. Who they say did not force a girl of 11 to have sex with him. So this is France. We can see that this attitude is really across the board. But also back in 2018, we were commenting on this Guardian article, the British state has a terrible secret. It kidnaps our children. And the journalist was Louise Tickle. She was absolutely on the button with this report. But of course, true to form, the Guardian sort of dropped the line of investigation. And so it didn't come to anything important. But the column was reporting around the same time that we had Eileen Campbell from the SNP in Scotland saying that we, the Scottish government, recognise that parents also have a role in making decisions about raising the children. So here was the Scottish state at least taking over control of the family and children, but this is the same state as exists south of the border that absolutely cannot guarantee the safety of children, because it's clear that people in the positions of power and the government and their agencies are involved in the abuse of children. Now, if I go way back to 2009, I gave a talk on child snatching by the state in Bristol at one of Ian Crane's early events, and I was pointing out with that Guardian report that, of course, we were pushing this subject many years ago. And this is one of the statements we made in that talk. Children stolen and kidnapped from their parents by the state using lies, false evidence, perjury, threats, intimidation, false medical reports, including sectioning, fraud, corruption in the public authorities, in the police courts, and the high levels of government. And what is the objective? To break up families. This is all part of the reordering of society, drug testing, body parts, and sexual abuse. So we absolutely weren't messing around in what we were talking about there. And true to form, the government simply doesn't want to get involved. If we go on a little bit, the Liverpool Express in 2017 was also talking about regional adoption agencies to be set up. So the very agencies who are facilitating some absolutely horrific abuse of children being taken from their parents and then abused. We've now got these regional adoption agencies, which the government was promoting, and you as parent, absolutely no control or comeback. This was a comment by Barry Kushner, the Liverpool City Council Children's Services. He said, this proposal will mean that we're able to make a better service for children and adopters. At the moment, each local authority is effectively competing with each other for adopters and profit. He didn't say that, I'm adding that. And there is a great deal of duplication of effort. By creating a regional agency, we will be able to widen the net of potential adopters, share expertise and ideas, and make sure adopters and children get a consistent level of support regardless of where they are. But of course, the key thing is that wherever there's children and they're being cared for, vast amounts of money are changing hands, and huge amounts of money change hands with children for adoption. So this is a very, very dangerous element of society. And of course, when police have dared to speak out, as John Wedger did many years ago, he was vilified by the police force, and others, lost his job, family threatened, because he pointed out that the state agencies, including the Met Police, absolutely knew that the abuse was going on. So you can find John Wedger in that interview on the UK column. Encourage you to have a listen to what he had to say. Diane, let's bring you back, and really we're going to end on wokeness, but you've got a little bit more to say about the Los Angeles fire.
Yeah, the Los Angeles fire, wokeness, and Elon Musk, and so on at the end. So let's just look at what happened in the fire department and the water department situation in California that obviously has not been sufficient. The service has not been sufficient. And part of it, what was back in 2022, when they were sending firefighting equipment to Ukraine rather than keeping things for themselves. And so that has been part of it. But a lot of it has been, I think, as a result of equality, diversity, and inclusion wokeness efforts, which has been destroying the city's infrastructure from within, essentially. And I'm going to give you some examples here of why I think this is happening. So first one is Fire Chief Kristen Crowley, who's in charge of the entire fire department. Now, to her credit, she did submit a report to the city in December of 2024, saying that because they have cut overtime hours and the budget, I think the budget overall was cut by $17 million, and some of that money went to EDI initiatives instead. So now she didn't have enough hours available for firefighters, especially if a major disaster occurred, which of course it has. So we have to ask where the priorities are. Kristen identifies as LGBTQ, and she was the Grand Marshal of the 2024 LA Pride Parade. So we've got our priorities in order there. She makes $440,000 a year. The deputy chief of the fire department, Christine Larson, who is the first Equity and Human Resources Bureau chief for the fire department and makes $400,000 a year, also identifies as LGBTQ. And she had this to say in the short clip about what she thinks the firefighter's responsibility is.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better. Is she strong enough to do this? Or you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
Personally, if somebody is carrying me out of a fire, I just want to get taken out of the fire. I don't care what they look like, and I don't care if they care what I look like, honestly. So I looked at the 2023 to 2026 strategic plan for the fire department. It has 7 goals overall. Goal number 3 is to commit to an organizational culture that embraces diversity, equity, and inclusion. The strategies include promoting DEI or EDI as systemic values and principles, creating this bureau, which Larson is now in charge of, making $400,000 a year, to provide leadership and guidance and resources to advance the DEI vision, reducing invisible barriers to DEI and creating opportunities to improve the diversity of recruits. So not necessarily their merit or their qualifications, their ability to fight a fire, but their diversity. And the water department is just as bad. Karen Bass, who I talked about earlier in the news, hired the CEO of the Water and Power Department. Her name is Janice Quinones. She makes $750,000 a year. She was just appointed in May. There have been problems with empty water reservoirs, disconnected, broken fire hydrants. Firefighters just haven't had enough water. And she previously held an executive role at an electric company in the States called PG&E, which previously went bankrupt, interestingly enough, over liability for several wildfires that have happened in California. So let's hear from her about her priority.
You call it powered by equity, and I know that it's been really important for the DWP to put an equity lens on everything.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the number one thing that attracted me to this role. Coming from the communities that I come, seeing what I've seen through my career in utilities and through the military. I've been in the Coast Guard 19 and a half years now, so I got 6 more months to qualify for my 20 years, which was my original goal.
Wow, congratulations, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. It's important to me that everything we do, it's with an equity lens and social justice and making sure that we right the wrongs that we've done in the past from an infrastructure perspective, and that we involve the community in that process. And this utility is serious about it, is authentic about it. And so I'm just super excited to be part of that movement.
So again, I think everybody has the right to access water, regardless of how you identify. But anyways, what's happening with, I think as a result of Elon Musk and some of the other major players, is that some of these policies, at least in America, and we can only hope that these will start to follow elsewhere throughout the West, is that the EDI policies are starting to go away. Just in the past couple of days, we've seen Meta and Amazon have announced that they are ending their EDI programs, saying they have caused legal and political risks. What a shock there, right? Anyways, Mark Zuckerberg, who owns Meta, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, has also said that they are ending their fact-checking program, criticized by Donald Trump and Republicans. And I personally believe maybe this has to do with the approach that, at least on the surface, Elon Musk has taken to the community notes that he provides on Twitter, rather than the fact-checking. Mark Zuckerberg was interviewed by Joe Rogan on his podcast in the last few days, and he told Rogan that he has always been concerned, which I don't believe, about being labeled the arbiter of truth, which I thought, by the way, was just send to Ardern, but apparently it's Zuckerberg, and that he was ill-prepared when the first issue first heated up after the 2016 election, when Trump was elected president, and he said that these demands to take down information became unreasonable under the Biden administration. And by the way, he now wants to be called Zuck, I think. Anyways, I think Zuck is bowing to save his company, because this is not at all what he has said for the past few years. And I personally think it's because of Trump and Musk and the influence. So we'll see what happens in a couple of weeks' time when Trump gets in.
You very much for that. A lot for us to think about, for the audience to think about, but this is the key thing we feel for 2025, is to be looking at what is actually happening, what the real drivers within politics and the community, what they are. We've got to get the lid off them. We've got to expose the bad ones. We've got to call things out for what it is, and we've got to use the real words. If it's fraud, corruption, if it's abuse, if it's perversion, we've got to use the real terms to call this out, because only by doing that are we really going to be working to stop this pretty horrific undertone of new politics. We'll leave it there. Ben, Diane, thank you very much for joining me. We're going to be we have a UK column extra in a couple of minutes' time. We're going to be talking about former Sergeant Tangi from Devon and Cornwall Police, who was arrested in the last couple of days with his girlfriend on allegations of stalking and harassment. We think there's a lot of the background to this man that we need to share with our audience. So if you're joining us for UK Column Extra, that's one of the subjects we'll be covering. We'll end there. Thank you very much for joining us wherever you are in the world. And a huge, huge thanks to all of the people that support us financially and keep UK Column operational. Thank you very much. We'll be back at the same time, 1 o'clock on Wednesday for the news. Don't forget that interview with Mike Yeadon at 1 o'clock tomorrow. Okay, we'll see you in a few moments. Bye-bye.